Welcome to this XPSITE3D webinar, the basics of road layouts from Innovice. My name is Stuart Hall-Cooper. I'm Head of Global Marketing here at Innovice, and I will very shortly be handing you over to my colleague Mike Reeves. Mike is our engineering manager. He has a long history in drainage and modelling, and he heads up our engineering team. So Mike, hello.
Thanks, Stuart. First thing I'll do then is swap to XPSITE3D, and everything that we're going to do today is going to be conducted in this package. So I believe some of you will be familiar with this, some of you will be entirely new to it. So just by way of introduction, XPSITE3D is aimed at the road design for new developments. So typically housing developments, industrial and commercial parks, things like that. Basically anything that involves single carriageway road design. We wouldn't claim that we can do the more complex stuff, things like motorway junction layout or dual carriageways or things like that. We have very good interaction with AutoCAD, but that's one thing that I'm not going to be talking about today. I'm not going to be talking about the interaction with AutoCAD and the import-export options. We'll do that in a separate webinar, which will be coming soon. So what we see here is a road layout or a site layout for a typical new housing development. And the other main thing that I'm not going to be talking about today is how we got to this point. I can view this in 3D. What we can see is that we've got a 3D DTM, digital terrain model, in the background there, and over the top of that we've got our architect's plan layout. And XPSITE3D has some really excellent tools for manipulating DXF or DWG files to create, for example, a 3D layout from a 2D plan. So again, I'm not going to be talking about that today. I'm purely going to be focusing on how we create objects within XPSITE3D itself. And as I said, that's a topic for another day. While we're sort of on the list of things I won't be talking about, in some of the handouts that we gave, some of the advertisements for this, we said that we will also be looking at a drainage layout. Having now practiced this presentation a couple of times, I think we're going to be very short on time. We're going to try and keep it to within an hour. So I doubt that I'll get time to talk about MicroDrainage in detail. And again, we'll schedule that for another day. So looking at our layout now, this is, as I say, typical road layout for a new design. What I'm going to do first is create a new road. There's three basic principles that underline XPSITE3D, and the first one is that roughly we guide you left to right through the use of the buttons. So you can see here I have a lot of buttons in this lower toolbar, and the first one I'm going to use starts on the far left hand side. So this is to create a new road. And what we see is another of the principles is that we only display the buttons which are appropriate to us. So because I haven't created anything yet, the only option that is available to me is to create a new centerline. And that's, again, as I said, another principle is that as you create things, other options become available to you. And so we keep the sort of live or active buttons to the appropriate ones. Now, I said there was some basic principles. The second principle is that we can always go back and edit things. So I'm going to create a new centerline and then I'll show how it's edited. But that's a theme that I'll be returning to again and again, the fact that we can edit things at any time during its creation or afterwards. So I'm going to create my first centerline. Now, I can create a centerline absolutely anywhere I like. We make extensive use of these snap tools that I'm showing you at the top here. So we can snap to an individual vertex, we can snap to an intersection, snap to any point along a line, etc., etc. So I could create this new centerline anywhere, or I can snap to the architect's drawing, and that's what I'm going to do now. So I snap to my first point. I can zoom in and out at any time as I go along, so I'm going to zoom in, snap to the first point, and now snap to the arc as we're going to go around this sharp corner here. Now, another underlying principle of XPSITE3D is that to create something, I can always do it graphically. So just as I'm showing here, I can click anywhere I like or snap to anything I like in an underlying drawing. However, I can also at any stage also type in the the item that I'm going to create. So for example, now I'm creating a new center line, I can always enter the coordinates of the next point in my change as I go along. So I'm not going to do that today. Instead, I'm going to do it graphically. But that's, I suppose, the third underlying principle, is that at any stage I can type in values, and as you'll see, I'll return to that again and again. So for reasons which will become more obvious later on, I'm going to snap to the center of this roundabout and then finish. So there, I've created my first center line. The zoom in and zoom out is done via the mouse wheel, or I just zoom around or pan around. It's all very easy, and we can pan and zoom at any stage. Now the top tip, the advice for creating center lines, is to use as little snap as possible. So I just snap to 3 locations: snap to the start, snap to that arc, and then snap to the end. And as I said before, a theme that I'll be returning to again and again is the fact that I can now edit this. So if I wanted to create another point along that line, I can enter its coordinates or do it graphically. If I create a point, once I've created it, I can then move it around, or if I'm not happy with it, I can then delete it. So once I'm happy with my center line, the next task is to create the horizontal alignment associated with that center line. So click on this tool and then click on the center line. I don't have to do them one at a time. I could put in all my center lines and then put in all my road characteristics afterwards, but I'll do this first one here. So we get through to this dialog box, which shows us the layout of the road, and we have the drawing here at the bottom, which shows the red line shows the top of the road, so we can see that in the channel it slopes away from the center line, center point, which is the high point, slopes down at a crossfall of 1 in 40, which is defined there. Then we step up to the front of the footway. The current step up height is 125 millimeters, and then we go back at a gradient of 1 in 40 to the back of the footway, and that's defined there. Now the default assumption is that this channel is symmetrical around a vertical center line. If we don't want that assumption to stick, we would just untick that box. I'm going to be talking more later about road widening and narrowing and that sort of thing, but the basic assumption, I guess, is that most roads are symmetrical around this vertical center line. Here we see that underlying principle that I have the opportunity to type in the width of my channel and of my footway, and in this case I'm going to snap to the underlying architect's drawing. So you can see snaps to any point along the line, along the side of the road. I'm going to apply the same principle to the footway, so I'm going to specify the back of the footway and again snap to that line. So at this stage I've set up the basic characteristics of my road and the associated footway. So we've got the red line which represents the top of the road. Underneath that you'll see that we've got this sort of grey-green line. Now this represents the bottom of the construction of the road, and we can edit those. You can see down here we've got the depth under road of 450 millimeters and a depth under the footway of 200 millimeters. I can edit those if I want to. The significance of these is that what we can do, and again it's not something I'm going to show today, but what we can do is create calculations of the total cut and fill that we would have on the site, and we perhaps wouldn't want these values to be taken into account in the sort of net removal or net application of fill material to the site. So these would be for construction only. Okay, so I've created my cross-section that I'm happy with, as I said, either by typing in the numbers or by picking it off the underlying AutoCAD drawing. This might be a section that I'm going to use again and again, so I'm going to save this and I'm going to call it New Road 1. Okay, so I've saved a template essentially. Okay, and I OK that, and it's now created my first road, and I've got my horizontal alignment. So the next thing to do is to sort out the vertical alignment. So just this tool, just click on it, show long section, and click on the road that I'm interested in. So I've only got one, so click on that road, and it brings up this long section. And what we've got here is got the red line represents the surface of the road, and the default assumption is that it's just a constant gradient from start to finish. The green line is being read from the underlying DTM, so we can instantly see how our road currently matches with the DTM. So I want to perhaps better match that road to the underlying DTM. So the way I would do that is to add a point, click anywhere on my road, and again I can either graphically move it where I like, or if I right click I can enter a change level or a gradient. So again, the opportunities to type in the values that I'm interested in. Okay, so I place it graphically in this case, and now obviously we don't want one gradient to change abruptly to another, so I'm going to introduce a curve so we have a transition from one gradient to the other. So again, click on the center point, changing gradient, and move out to how long I want that arc to continue. And again, as you'd expect, as we've seen several times already, we have the opportunity just under right click, instead of graphically assigning that curve, we can enter these curve parameters in terms of the length of that transition, or our K or R values, which define the characteristics of that curve. Those of you who are familiar with DMRB, Design Manual for Roads and Bridges, will know more about that. So in this case, I'm just going to do it graphically. So just click on my curve, draw it out, and there we have it. There's my transition. So what this drawing is currently showing us is the red and green lines to show how my road matches up to the underlying DTM. What we've got at the bottom here is characteristics of the tabular values. And we can customize these values. We can customize the headings that appear here. We can customize how often we display the changes, and you'll see at the moment it's using the default of 10 meters. So every 10 meters it's going to tell us something about what's going on. And you'll see, so every 10 meters it tells us the characteristics of the levels in the carriageway and the left-hand, right-hand channel. And it also provides that information at significant points. So my transition points and my intercept points, it'll tell me what's going on there as well, and we can customize all that. So very, very quick and easy to sort out my vertical alignment. So I've created my first road. Let's go forward and create a second road. So I'm going to create this road that loops around here. So create a road, create my center line, zoom in if I want to, click to start it. As I said, the principle is you do as few clicks as possible. So click on the curve there, click on the bend there, and then come back and a final snap to finish it there. Okay, and quit that, finish that command. And then create the road, again, same principle as before. Click on the road center line, snap to what the architect's done for us, snap to here, and it creates that second road. Okay. Now at this stage, it's identified that what I describe as my minor road 2 is joining to my major road number 1. And at this stage, it gives me the opportunity to type in the characteristics of that junction. Now remember the underlying philosophy, I can always go back and edit this later, but I have the opportunity to type it in now, so I'm going to take that opportunity. So some of the values I type in throughout this presentation may not be realistic, but I hope you understand the principle of how easy it is to type in and edit things. So we type in the first values of our junction, create that junction, type in the second values of the junction. So I've now got my second road, and I'm just going to very quickly go and do the vertical alignment of that road. So this one we go up a steep hill in the middle here, so I'm going to put in a point, move that point roughly where I want it, put in a curve, and that's now created. I'm happy with that. If I now look back at the vertical alignment of my first road, road number 1, we can see now that it includes the 2 points where road 2 joins to it. So that, knowing that is useful in itself. But if I was to edit the vertical alignment of this road, it would also edit the endpoints of road 2. So if you update something, it updates everything else appropriately. It's not as if you'd have to edit road 1 and then go and edit road 2. All that would be done for you. So I said a major feature of this software is its ability to go and edit stuff. So let's have a look at editing the location of this junction. Say, for example, that we wanted to move this junction slightly to the left or right. All I need to do is click on the junction, move it, and click, and it's updated everything else appropriately. If I was to go back to the vertical alignment of road 1, I would see the point at which road 2 connects has also moved. So everything is updated exactly as you'd hope. At this point, it's worth mentioning that there is an undo button. So if I'm not happy with my changes, I'll just undo. But normally we would just click and move, click and move, and then click. I'm going to move it back to where it started with. Back there. Okay. Okay, so let's move on now and look at road widening. So I'm going to concentrate on a bit up here. We'll see we've got a couple of parking bays on this road here. So let's look at how we could represent those parking bays. So we have a variety of tools available. They range from the very simple through to the very complicated. I'm going to start with the very simple tools. Now, the first thing it's asking me in terms of road widening is which channel or footpath, footway, do I want to move? Now, it is significant whether you pick the front of the footway or the back of the footway. Let's start by picking the back of the footway. So I pick this line here. Now it's offering me a variety of options, as I said, ranging from the very simple through to the very complicated. I'm going to start with the very simple one. And it's asking me to pick a start chainage, an end chainage, and an offset. So again, I could use my snap tools if I want to. So I'm going to start it there. I'm going to end it there. And then I'm going to set the offset to the back of these parking bays. Okay. Now we can see where it intends to put it. Let's now finish that, and it's going to make that change. So the footway has been extended backwards to a greater level, and that's going to cover our parking bays. I guess more often you would want the roadway to extend there. So let's do that. I'm going to do that over this side. So again, a simple road widening, but this time significantly, I'm picking the front of the footway rather than the back of the footway. So pick the front of the footway, a simple parallel, pick where we want it to start, could snap, don't have to, pick where we want it to end, down there, and pick the offset and place that. Now, because I picked the front of the footway, this time where I end it, it extends the carriageway rather than the footway. So that's all you have to do, is whichever one you pick is the one that's going to be extended. Okay. Let's look at a slightly more complicated road widening now. We can see down here that the architect has said that we would need to put in some bays here, and the bays, rather than coming straight out and coming straight back, they go out on an angle. The other thing I want to do is that rather than sticking with the same gradient for the road, I'm going to put in a different gradient for my extension. So an example of this might, for example, be a bus stop. We want the bus stop to be draining. We want the rainfall that lands off it to run off it into the carriageway. So two more complicated things. One is a more complicated shape, and the other is the manipulation of the gradients on the carriageway. So to do that, I'm now going to use a secondary channel, and I'm going to create a new secondary channel. Again, it's asking me front or back, pick the front. And this time I'm going to go for a slightly more complicated shape. Rather than coming straight out and straight back, I'm going to add a little transition. So my start chainage is here, my end chainage is here, and then my end offset comes out. Now let's take it out a bit further so we can really see it. I'm going to take it out here. Okay, that's what I've done. Now I've brought it out, so I now need to bring it back. So a second transition to bring it back. So the start of where it comes back is going to be, say, here. The end of where it comes back is going to be here. And then my end offset is going to bring it back, probably snap it back to that road there. Okay. So that's now my more complicated shape. And you can imagine you can create some fancy shapes if you need to. Now at this stage, when I click apply these changes, I'm asked, what do I want the grade or gradient of this extra widening to be? Now at the moment it's sloping out from the center line of the road out to the footway at a gradient of 1 in 40. If I make it minus 40, then it will slope in the opposite direction. We can also see that we've got the opportunity to put in a little 25mm upstand there, which I've done. I can obviously edit that. I'm going to edit it now or go back and edit it later. So I put that in. So this portion is now sloping in the opposite direction from the carriageway. Let's show that. There's a couple of ways that we can be sure of what's happening. So if I click on the road and click on this tool, the contours tool, what it's doing is it's going to put in a blue line at the moment for every 0.5 meters in height. Having worked with this data set before, I know that 0.05 meters works well. So we're putting in contours every 0.05 meters. We're going to put in a light blue line, and for every 5 light blue lines I'm going to put in a red line. I can change the colors, I can choose whether these contours extend over the footway or not. I can do what I like basically, but this at its most basic, we're going to put in a blue line for every 0.05 meters of contour. So put in that, and now we can clearly see that the contour lines are sloping in the opposite direction for our bus stop than they are on the main carriageway. If I zoom in as well, we can see that because they don't come together, that's to account for the upstand. So we can really see it quite clearly, but probably the better way is to view it in 3D. So let's have a look at the 3D view. We can see here, it's currently getting a bit confused by the background DTM, so I can turn that off. So we can now see that. I can change the vertical exaggeration, and then using the wheel on the mouse, I can fly around and view it exactly how I like. So we can see here, we can see clearly that this bus stop is draining towards the curb in the same way that the main carriageway is draining towards the curb. If I zoom in, I can even see that little 25mm upstand that we've got there. So I can confirm that my design is good. Okay, the next thing I was going to do was another road widening, but this time around a curve. So the architect had decided we're going to have a little sort of safety zone or zone for bigger vehicles to turn around. So we're going to introduce that. So again, let's go for a secondary channel tool. Introduce a new one. Again, it's asking me to select which one I'm going to manipulate. So it's the front of the footway on this inside. Pick that line, and then I'm going to go for this one, which is a mitre. So it's asking me where it wants my mitre to start, where it wants it to end, and then the radius of this mitre. And again, snapping might work well here, although I don't have to. So I'm going to set it there. OK to finish it, and then shows me what it's about to do. Apply those changes, and it's going to ask me again what the gradient's going to be. So I'm going to choose 1 in 40, so it slopes in the opposite direction. Okay, so we can now see that this this turning zone has a reverse gradient to the others. Now, talking of sort of super elevation and different cambers, different gradients, what we might want to do is to change the super elevation as we move around this corner. In sort of layman's terms, we describe this as an adverse camber at the moment. Vehicles travelling around the outside of this bend would be forced to the outside. So what we want to do is to change that gradient so that it all comes from the top of the curve down to the bottom here. So super elevation tool, very, very simple. I pick my super elevation button and pick that I want to make a new transition. Now what it's asking me now is to firstly again pick which side of the carriageway I'm going to manipulate. So obviously it's going to be the outside, so I can pick any point along this line. So I pick that line, and it's asking me where does it want that transition to start. So I pick my start chainage, maybe down here, pick my end chainage here, and then it's going to change from a 1 in 40 to a -40. So rather than sloping from the center out, it's in this case going to slope from the curb line in towards the center line. So I've applied that transition now. Now that transition, now we see that it's sloping from the right side here towards the left side, and it does that for the entire length of this road. So what I need to do is after the curve is finished, I want to bring it back to its normal cross section. So I need to add a second transition. Again, pick the line that I'm going to manipulate, pick where I'm going to start it, pick where I'm going to end it, and now it's coming back from -40 to +40. So we can see that before the curve it was a normal cross section. Through the curve we've put in the super elevation, and then after the curve is finished we've gone back to the normal cross section. Okay, so focusing on this curve now, if we have a look at this in 3D, we can see, I'm going to change the vertical exaggeration again, we can see that we've got both that that transition, that mitre in the center there, and we've got this super elevation on the outside. I hope that shows up reasonably well there. We can see it, see how that changes. Okay. Right, the next thing is roundabouts. This is really what we think is one of our key features. So I'm going to move down to the bottom here, down to the southeast, and look at this roundabout. So what I need to do is to create a couple of extra roads. So bear with me while I create a couple of new roads. So I'm going to create a road that matches this one. Click to start it. Click to any bends that exist within the road. We've got a few here. Click, there's one more down here. And then the crucial thing is that the two roads have to come together. So I'm zooming right in and clicking on exactly where that first road ended. And then right click and finish. Now I create the characteristics of this road. So as we did before, put in the characteristics. This time for speed, I'm going to use the new road 1 that I created. So click that. And what we can see is that it's identified that these two roads end at the same point, and therefore by default it's assumed that we're going to put a roundabout in here. We can see a pretty ugly roundabout at the moment. This point here is especially awful. We'll come back and edit that later, but for now I'm going to create this first junction. Okay, so we've got our roundabout. Now at any stage we can go in and add in another road. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to add in a second road approaching here from the south. So again, click on a point, click on the curve. This road actually changes direction just as it enters the roundabout. So I'm going to click on that point there. And again, crucially, I'm going to match it to exactly the center of where those other two roads were. So finish that, and now create this third road. So click on here. Again, I'm going to use my preset, my template, and click OK, and it creates that road. So it's all looking a bit busy at the moment, so I'm going to turn off the contours, and we can see our, as I said, fairly ugly looking roundabouts. So the first thing to notice is these red lines. These are the deflection radiuses. According to the Design Manual of Roads and Bridges, these shouldn't be greater than 100 meters. So in the software, by default, if they're greater than 100 meters, they're displayed in red. If they're less than 100 meters, they're displayed in blue. And that we can edit. So if I look at the characteristics of the roundabout now, edit that roundabout, click on it, we can see down here I've got this maximum deflection radius. If I was to change that, the only thing that it would do would change whether they were displayed in red or blue. So I'm just going to edit this roundabout now. Now this is where my lack of understanding and my lack of background in road design really comes to the fore. I'm sure there's people who have a much better understanding of the theory of roundabout design, but I'm just going to show how easy it is for now. So we can change the diameter. I'm going to change that to 40 meters. I'm going to keep the crossfall at 1 in 40, so it's obviously sloping from the outside to the inside at 1 in 40. I'm going to add in an apron here, so I'm going to give it a 3-meter apron, and I'm going to press OK. Now you can see that the lines, the deflection radiuses have come down. They've changed from red to blue. The other thing to mention at this stage, and as I said, I don't claim to be an expert in this, but these white lines represent the fact that we use a method, a Stockdale method. We use a sort of adaptation of that, and that shows that the high point on this roundabout is here and here. So traffic arriving, for example, from the northeast and leaving from the southeast would use this portion of the roundabout and be deflected to the outside, whereas anybody going right round the outside or right round from, say, arriving from the southeast and leaving northwest would be deflected entirely to the center. So it is based around the Stockdale method, but it's an adaptation, a sensible adaptation of that. So looking at traffic arriving from the northeast and leaving southeast, you'll see that a car would come onto the roundabout. It would then change its direction once, change its direction twice before leaving. So we've got this sort of ugly dead zone in here, a sort of zone where gravel might accumulate, not great for cyclists, that sort of thing. So we want to edit that. So I'm going to edit the junction horizontal. So click on the edit button, click on the junction I want to edit, and I get the opportunity to describe the transition from the road onto the roundabout. So in this case, there are some more complicated options, but it's very basic. We just change the radius as we approach the roundabout. Okay, so I've changed it to 40 meters, and we'll see that there's a much more smooth transition now. Also, because I've widened that entry onto the roundabout, we can see that it started to create a little traffic island there, and I can manipulate the characteristics of that island. So, for example, if I was to change the entry and exit widths, what we would see is that that island increases in size appropriately. Okay, so for example, if I just change the exit width like that, we've got a little island there. Okay. Now there is also the ability to edit the roundabout verticals. So if I just switch on the contours again, we can see rather busy, but the theory is that, for example, for this road arriving from the northwest, that has obviously a gradient of 1 in 40 sloping away from the centre line, and that's got to change as we enter the roundabout, where the roundabout slopes from the outside to the inside, or uses the principle here. So we've got some changes in these gradients as we transition from one to the other. So editing the roundabout verticals, click on any of these lines. We do have the opportunity to edit basically the transition length. We can either leave the software to do it, or we can put in our own transitions. Perhaps a better way of looking at this is in 3D. So we'll just close off these contours again and zoom out. And if we look at it now in 3D, we can see, I'm going to edit the vertical exaggeration to really see that. So we can see what's happening now with this roundabout, and you can go and edit the junction verticals so that we get a reasonable transition as the roads enter the roundabout. Okay. So a question that we often ask people who we are demonstrating this software to is, let's assume that the architect or whoever said that you need to move this roundabout. Using the existing techniques that you're using, the existing software that you're using at the moment, how long would it take you to move that roundabout? And a typical answer that comes back is somewhere between half a day and a day. To move the roundabout, to redesign all the transitions, to get everything correct is a painful operation. Fortunately, hopefully those days are now past, because to move a roundabout, all we need to do is to click on the center of it. I'm going to turn off that snap tool. Click on the center of it and choose where we want to move it to. Now, we can't move it kilometers away. It does still have to be where these three roads are going to come together. But look what happens when we try to move it a small distance. It does it instantly. I can do that again, just move it wherever I like, and it redesigns everything. Obviously, we'd have to go back and edit some of these junction horizontals a bit. Maybe we needed even to look at the verticals, but you've seen how quick and easy it is to do that. So very, very quick. There's always the back button. What I'm going to do now is just move it back to where it was originally and snap it to the center of the roundabout. So one of the key features is the time that will be saved simply from making minor modifications. We saw it for the junctions, and we see it for the roundabouts as well. Let's go back now and look at a few of the more minor features. As we would expect, we can do curbs. There's a few options for curbs. We can either lower the entire footway. So, for example, if we've got access to a major site with heavy lorries accessing it, we want to lower the entire footway, or we can just drop the curbs. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to ignore the architect's drawing for now. I'm not going to snap to anything, but I'm just going to create a curb. So let's do that. I don't know, let's start it here and end it here. So it's asking me about the characteristics of that, how wide it's going to be. I can do it the full length of the footway, or I can do it the partial length. I can do 2 footways on either side of the road, or I can space them individually. It's entirely up to me. And of course, I know I've laboured this point, but of course we can go back and edit these afterwards. So create this footway, zoom in, view it in 3D, change the vertical exaggeration, and we can see that it looks pretty sensible. The other thing we can do very, very easily is that we can put in speed tables or speed ramps. So I want to put in a new speed table. I click the road that I want to edit. I click where I want it to start, where I want it to finish, and I can also edit the, for example, if I wanted to make the start and end ramps different, I can do that. It'll update those. We can see the start ramp has now been increased to 2.5 meters. Of course, I can change my table height now, or I can come back to it later. Joe, I know I've laboured this point about coming back and editing things, but generally when you create something, there's always a creation tool, and generally next to it will be an edit tool, so I can go and edit that speed table, and then the next one over will be the delete tool. So every object has a create, edit, and delete functionality. Again, as we would expect, once we've created something, we would expect to be able to go and view it in 3D and have a look at how it's done. I haven't changed the vertical exaggeration this time, but it is there. We would see the fact that it was 75 millimeters higher than the surrounding road. Okay, there's a number of features to show you. The next one is going to be the interfacing tools. So cut and fill embankments. So if we create a new interface, it's asking me which road do I want to apply this interface to. Let's go with this one. Now what it's asking me at this stage is what are the characteristics of my embankment. So the default assumption is that it's a 1 in 3 slope for both my cut and fill, and I'm going to have a 1 in 3 slope on both the left and right side of the road. I can obviously edit that. I can also add in steps, so if I don't want a consistent slope along the embankment, I can change that. I'm just going to go with a simple, very, very simple 1 in 3 slope for both cut and fill and for the left and right of the road. So click on that and it creates those. Okay, and you'll see that if I've done any road widening or narrowing, it's got the little tails to show me whether it's a cut or a fill, that sort of thing. So all very easy. If I now want to add in something slightly more complicated, I can add in one of these interface regions. So let's say, for example, that we've got this assumption of a 1 in 3 slope. Let's say we wanted to change it to a 1 in 6 slope for a portion. So all I would do is add in an interface region. It's asking me which side of the carriageway do I want to do that. I'm going with the back of the footway here. So I pick the line as is appropriate. And instead of a 1 in 3 slope, I'm now going to go to a 1 in 6 slope. Now it's asking me now, where do I want that 1 in 6 slope to start and where do I want it to end? So we could type in the changes or we can just pick it. So pick the start, pick the end down here. And finally, it's asking me about a merge length. So do I want it to rapidly transition from 1 in 3 to 1 in 6 or do I want a gradual transition? Let's say that at the start I want a gradual transition. It's over 10 meters. It's going to gradually transition from 1 in 3 to 1 in 6, and then at the end it's going to come back abruptly back to 1 in 3. So click that, and I can see quite nicely now here in the plan view we've got that transition from 1 in 3 to 1 in 6, and then it abruptly comes back to 1 in 3. And again, always at any stage I can look at that and I can see that in action. So I can see that transition from 1 in 3 to 1 in 6. Okay, it goes a bit strange if I change this, but you can see that there. You can see the gradual transition from one to the other. And of course, as you would expect, as we all hope, if I was to go and edit the vertical alignment of this road, it would update those embankments at the same time. You know, if I raise this road up any further, those embankments are going to be bigger, and it's going to do that all immediately as we go along. Okay, getting away from roads, just to I think draw towards a conclusion now, but to get away from roads, one of the other things that we have to do, or we are able to do, is to put in earthworks or ponds. So let's show one of those. So I can pick a general earthworks now, and it's asking me, do I want to create an earthworks or create a new pond? And just like you'd expect, we can always swap from one to the other. So let's create an earthworks first. So I'm going to create my first earthworks, put in the outline where I want it to sit. Let's go with that. Click to end the command. And next thing is perhaps round off those corners a bit. So make it a slightly different shape. And I guess you're probably bored of me saying this now, but I can edit this now, or I can edit it later, but I can move it around, I can rotate it, do whatever I like with it. But at one stage, I'm happy with the outline. Now, the next thing it's asking me, or the next thing I might want to do, is to set a level for this. So in this example, I'm going to set a level high. I'm going to put it above the surrounding DTM. So let's go with, let's say 36 meters. So it's really quite high now. And what I might want to do is to add an interface. So just like the roads, we were looking at the fact that embankments or cuts would have a slope that you have complete control over. Let's go with this 1 in 3 slope again. So we can now see the embankment which exists around this earthworks at the moment. Now, if I was to move this at this stage, it would update that appropriately. So if I was to say, take it over here, for example, put it in here, you can see that the embankment is entirely different because the relationship between a level of 36 meters and the underlying DTM is entirely different in this part of the model than it was in my original location. So let's move it back. And we got back to my original embankment. Let's now put some definition to this earthworks. So one of the first things I can do is create a parallel. I'm going to create a parallel to this line and just put in, this is essentially asking me, where do I want to put in my next contour? So again, I know I've been repetitious about this, but we can always do it just by placing it by eye or right-clicking and setting a manual offset. So I'm going to say that my second contour is 4 meters inside my first contour. That first contour had a level of 36. Let's make this second contour something different. Let's make it, say, 33. Okay, I'm going to add in a third contour, and this one I'm just going to apply manually. So I'm just going to apply the shape of this third contour. And this third contour, rather than being at a constant level, I'm going to give it a slope. So perhaps if this is a pond, I want my pond to drain to one corner. So click on the thing I want to edit, click on a line to show me how it's going to be edited, and then I'm going to specify a level and a gradient. So the bottom of this pond is going to be 1 in 30, and it's going to slope up at a gradient of 1 in 10. Hopefully this will make more sense when I view it in 3D, but the idea is that I've created that essentially a polygon there, and that polygon is going to have a slope of 1 in 10 according to that line that I created. So it can slope a 1 in 10 or whatever I choose in any direction. Let's have a look at how that looks in 3D. So just going to my 3D tool as always, and we can see looks quite nice actually. So we've got a sort of, you can see this earthworks with its an embankment around its outside and how it looks, and you can see that 1 in 10 slope that we've got. If we need to drain it to one end, we do it like that. Final thing is I want to perhaps change this from an earthworks into a pond. So rather than an earthworks, change it into a pond. I can, if I want to, give it a name. So I'm going to call it Pond 1. I'm going to set the level for the water in there. So let's go with, let's say 32 meters for that. Okay. So what we can see now is it identifies where the water is. Of course, it identifies it in 3D as well. And crucially, up here, it tells me my cut, my fill, and my water volumes. So we can see that we've perhaps overdone the fill, underdone the cut. So I can go and change that if I need to. That principle of cut and fill volumes and all of that sort of stuff also applies to the roads and their embankments. So if I want to produce a report, I can do that of my total cut and fills across the site. I guess I said at the start that I wasn't going to talk too much about how this product interacts with other products, but just to show you one of the more basic things that it does is we've had these setting out tools. So if I was to click and create a new setting out tool, it's asking me at this stage for a road, so I'm going to pick a road center line, and then it's going to create a table about the properties of that center line. And again, as always, I have complete control about how that table appears and what appears in that table. So in this one, I'm just going to include the center line levels along that. I'm then asked to place it wherever I like. If I zoom in, we can see that we've got the chainage, we've got the locations of each of the chainage points, and the level, and then it tells me significant things that are happening. So whether it's a straight or whether it's going around a curve. So all of that matches the horizontal and vertical alignment that I set up right at the start. Now this table can be exported. It can be exported to AutoCAD if you want to embed it in one of your drawings there, or it can be exported to Excel. So say, for example, you wanted to download that into a GPS system. So save it in an Excel spreadsheet as CSV format, and then do whatever you like with it from there, or save it to AutoCAD. Okay, I'm going to draw to a conclusion now. I'm with Stuart. I'll hand back to him in a second. Stuart works in marketing, and because of that, he said, provide a little taster for what the next one might be. So we've talked a lot about the fact that the next one will be all about import and export and how we interact with AutoCAD and that kind of stuff. And the other major thing that we're going to focus on next time is the drainage. So as a little taster for the drainage, I'll just show you how drainage works. The first thing that we would do is we would switch on the gullies. So we can see here that we've got the gullies. We can edit to some extent how often those gullies appear, and you can see those gullies appear appropriately. So you remember I sorted out the super elevation around this curve. So this curve slopes, in this case, from north to south. The gullies have been therefore only around the south part where it's draining to. Whereas when we go back to our normal transition of sloping away from the center line, we obviously have the gullies on either side of that center line. So I locate my gullies. I would then create my drainage network to serve those gullies. I would export that drainage network to a MicroDrainage MDX file. So we've got an MDX file. I would do my optimization in MicroDrainage, but so that's a little teaser for next time. It's going to be all about manipulation of surfaces, saving of data, working with AutoCAD in conjunction with this product. But I hope for now I've given you a sort of very brief oversight of how it works. If you want to learn this stuff in detail, talk to our sales people about a trial. We have a one-day training course which will take you really from knowing nothing about this topic to being a sort of competent XPSITE3D user, and it really is that simple. In one day you can really understand all the functionality of that, and I hope I've shown you how easy it is to use and how easy it is to manipulate data. Okay, so with that, I'll hand you back to Stuart.
Okay, just like to say thank you for joining us. If there is anything else that you'd like to learn about XPSITE3D, or you'd like to take the trial that Mike mentioned, please contact us. Our telephone number here is 01635 582 555, or email us sales-emir@innovise.com. Or if you want to take the time, visit our website, innovise.com/products/XPSITE3D. There's also our YouTube channel where we have a number of videos about XPSITE3D and our other great products as well. And with that, I'm going to leave you to enjoy the rest of your days and say thank you all very much. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks.
And take care.
Bye now. Bye.
Bye-bye.